I'm a Congresswoman representing the Massachusetts 7th Congressional District.
Abortion is health care and a fundamental human right.
We affirm that representation matters.
This issue.
Organized people.
A conversation with Ayanna Pressley on her legislative agenda, the victories and the challenges, next on Cityline.
I'm the Congresswoman representing the Massachusetts 7th Congressional District.
Abortion is health care and a fundamental human right.
We affirm that representation matters.
This is an economic justice issue. It is a racial justice issue. It is a gender justice issue.
Organized people always beats organized money.
We are still in the civil rights movement. And movements do not move themselves.
That's Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley on some of the most pressing issues of the times, the continuing fight for equity and racial justice, the successes she's achieved and the work that still needs to be done, and the new challenges as the 118th Congress gets underway. Good afternoon, I'm Karen Holmes Ward and welcome to Cityline. Today, an in-depth conversation with Representative Ayanna Pressley on the top issues facing Massachusetts and the nation. Thank you for joining us. How are you today?
Good to be with you, Karen. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you. So you've been pursuing a very powerful agenda, equity, social justice, but a lot has changed since you were first elected to Congress in 2018. The Democrats are no longer in the majority in the House, and you've called the Republicans unfit to lead, and it's been made clear that there are differing priorities between the two parties. So how do you plan to move forward and work together to pass legislation?
Well, first and foremost, I want to say that, I think, how you start is how you finish. And how we entered into this 118th Congress with such a chaotic speakership battle, I think further underscores their unfitness to govern. I'll say personally also it was very challenging to stomach that members who I believe emboldened white supremacy and contributed to inciting violence and the insurrection of January 6th, who seek to undermine free and fair elections, which undermines our democracy. Instead of those members being expelled, they were sworn in. And so I think how we started the 118th Congress is a sobering window into what we can expect under a Republican majority for the next 2 years. That being said, I'm battle tested and that much more emboldened to do what I've been doing the last 4 years when I started during a Trump administration. And we're going to have to be very aggressive in harm mitigation, while also Democrats affirmatively making the case for the Democrats for the next 2 years so that we can get that gavel back.
Let's talk about the changing faces of your party's leadership. Massachusetts Representative Katherine Clark is now the Democratic whip. Representative Hakeem Jeffries, the Democratic House leader, and Representative Pete Aguilar is the chair of the House Democratic Caucus. So what does this picture of a new diverse leadership team say about the Democratic Party?
I think this historic and unprecedented diversity and representative leadership in the Democratic Caucus proves that Democrats are for the people. We have representative leadership, a more representative Democratic caucus than the Republican caucus of the citizenry that has entrusted us to lead and to govern and to center them each and every day in the policies and the budgets that we advance. I think the Democrats, again, have 2 years to make the affirmative case that we center the people, that we are pro-worker, pro-woman, pro-immigrants' rights, pro-justice, pro-democracy. while the Republicans, again, right out the gate, a chaotic speakership fight, and also the rules package that they advanced had many things that are anti-worker, anti-woman, and I think really un-American.
Do you see yourself in a leadership role in the future?
Well, I'm the Congresswoman for the Massachusetts 7th, so I'm already in a leadership role, and I'm humbled and grateful to have been decisively reelected to a third term. And I do think the role that I've already played, both as a lead negotiator in the student debt cancellation, working with the White House on a moratorium on a federal death penalty and abortion rights, and my role as chair of the Abortion Rights and Access Task Force, that I'm primed to continue that work and that advocacy. I also co-chair the House Haiti Caucus. So again, I'm battle tested, poised and ready and emboldened to lead on behalf of the Massachusetts 7th, and working closely. Let us not forget, Karen, that although the Democrats are in the minority in the House, we do have the White House still. And there's still much that can be done by way of executive action. And then moreover, what a time it is to be alive, living and serving in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts with historic representation and Democratic leadership in the corner office. And so I look forward to working closely with the Healy Driscoll administration, Attorney General Campbell, and others, and certainly all the mayors in the Massachusetts 7th, because we'll need them to stand in the gap and to center the people, especially under these 2 years under Republican majority.
Let's talk a little bit more about the power of women, specifically women of color. You just spoke of it. You also referenced Coretta Scott King during the Martin Luther King Jr. Day celebrations. Tell us more about how you're harnessing that power and why it's increasingly important in leadership.
Well, Black women throughout history have been on the front lines in doing the work of social, racial, gender, economic justice, really doing the work of freedom, of liberation for all marginalized people. Certainly, we play an outsized role at the ballot box and on the ballot. We have been the truth tellers, the table shakers, the justice seekers. And so it is a humbling honor to build upon that foundation and that legacy, and to do my best to righteously continue to steward that work as a representative of Black women and on behalf of the Massachusetts 7th and the Democratic Party.
Let's turn to the issue of reproductive rights and the overturning of Roe v. Wade. Not only did you protest in front of the Supreme Court, you and Massachusetts Congresswoman Katherine Clark were arrested. So let's talk about how you plan to counter what you call the conservative assault on reproductive rights.
Well, again, as chair of the Abortion Rights and Access Task Force under the Pro-Choice Caucus, this is the first pro-choice majority Congress. And I think that in the midterm elections, we saw the electorate affirm on ballot questions throughout the country in the wake of the Dobbs decision that abortion care is health care, and that access is important to people: bodily autonomy, reproductive justice. Very fortunate, again, to live in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, which did pass the Roe Act several years ago. And so we are one of those safe haven states. When Roe was overturned, our legislature locally acted swiftly to advance more robust resources, recognizing that people from triggered law states would be coming here to the Commonwealth seeking abortion care. More recently, since we have been working very closely with the administration throughout this, we were pleased to see the FDA heed our calls, and now you'll be able to access abortion medication at your local pharmacies. And again, so this is really just about a healthcare justice issue. And as we saw with the Republicans with their rules package, where they sought to advance 3 anti-choice, anti-healthcare bills, that is why it is important that we continue to leverage every tool available to us, beginning with this Democratic White House. And so, again, I'm encouraged by this most recent action by the FDA, and I'll continue to work with the Healy Driscoll administration and my colleagues in the House to ensure that we're doing everything possible to provide abortion access, which is health care and a fundamental right.
Let's talk about some of your recent successes, such as the passage of the Post-Disaster Mental Health Response Act, which will provide mental health support for survivors of natural disasters and terrorist attacks that are designated emergency declarations by FEMA. Now, you have a history of advocating for survivors of trauma, so talk about the importance of this bill.
Yes, well, the first thing I want to lift up is that I think it's so important that we govern and legislate in a way that is cooperative. And so this is a work that I did in partnership with survivors of the Boston Marathon bombing. We were contacted by Manya, who reached out to my office to make us aware of the fact that as a survivor of the marathon bombing, she had not been able to access behavioral and mental health services. And certainly that was a very traumatic event. And so it's critical that survivors of natural disasters or terrorist attacks like the Boston Marathon bombing are often left grappling with just long-lasting trauma, which impacts their mental health, that they are able to access these critical mental health services. And so my Post-Disaster Mental Health Act, which I'm proud to say, Karen, was signed into law by President Biden, it will expand eligibility so that survivors of various types of disasters can access the mental health services and supports that they so desperately need and they deserve. So our Post-Disaster Mental Health Act, again, which has been signed into law, will expand access to these resources and save lives. And I want to thank Manya Chalinsky, again, a survivor of the Boston Marathon attack, for reaching out to our office. And let this be a reminder to my constituents writ large that we actively listen to you. We are moved by your stories. And not only just emotionally are they resonant, we're moved to action, moved to act legislatively.
All right, and we're going to be back with Representative Ayanna Pressley. You're going to stay with us to talk about working with the Healey Driscoll administration. That's next on Cityline.